So, let's go. You know Saturn, you've seen it 100 times. It's the pretty one. The one on the poster, the one with the rings, the one a kid draws when you say the word planet. It looks calm. It looks like jewelry. It looks like the friendliest thing in the sky. That's the trick. Because Saturn is the one place in the solar system that wouldn't even bother to kill you with violence. It would do it quietly. It would do it without a single hard surface for you to hit, without a moment of impact, without anything you could call ground. You would simply fall and keep falling, and the planet would close over you like water closing over a dropped coin. And that's just the first reason. Tonight you're going to fall through all 10. A wind that moves faster than sound and never once stops. Lightning that makes our worst storms look like a struck match. A storm so big it ran into the back of itself. A planet that hid the length of its own day from us for decades. Moons that look like weapons and keep secrets. And at the very end, the part nobody tells you about the rings. The reason the most beautiful thing in the solar system is also the saddest. So get comfortable. We're going in. And the first thing you should know is that there's nothing to land on. Number 1, there is no ground. Picture yourself dropping towards Saturn. You expect what you'd expect anywhere. A surface coming up to meet you. A desert, an ocean, a sheet of ice. Something. There's always a something. Not here. You fall into the cloud tops first, and it is brutally cold, around minus 180 degrees Celsius. A cold that doesn't sting so much as switch you off. You keep going. The clouds get thicker. First a deck of frozen ammonia, pale and bright. Then a layer below that made of something called ammonium hydrosulfide, which is exactly as pleasant as it sounds. Then, deeper still, clouds of water, the only familiar thing in the whole descent. And the whole time, you're waiting for the floor. You're bracing for it the way your body always braces. That animal certainty that the fall ends with a hit. The hit never comes. Instead, the air just gets denser. It stops feeling like air and starts feeling like fog, then like syrup, then like something with no name that's halfway between gas and liquid. The pressure climbs past anything your body was built to survive. Millions of times the pressure you're sitting in right now. It doesn't crush you in one dramatic moment. It crushes you the way the deep ocean crushes a submarine, except deeper and hotter, and with no bottom to finally rest on. Because there is no bottom. Go far enough down and the hydrogen itself gives up being a gas and turns into a metal, a hot liquid metal sky with no shore. Below that, somewhere, there's a core, but it's not a place. It's a smear of rock and ice and pressure so intense, the rules of materials you learned in school stop meaning anything. The temperature down there is hotter than the surface of the sun. And we know this isn't a guess because we tried it. Not with a person, with a spacecraft. The Cassini probe spent 13 years studying Saturn, and when it ran low on fuel in 2017, the people who built it did something that sounds almost cruel. They aimed it straight into the planet and let it fall. It went down through those clouds, screaming readings back to Earth for as long as it could, until the atmosphere crushed it and tore it apart, and the signal simply stopped. The most advanced machine we ever sent to Saturn was swallowed by it in a couple of minutes. That's the kindest thing Saturn does to anything that gets too close. It takes it apart quickly. So you never land on Saturn, you dissolve into it, and here's the detail that should genuinely unsettle you. Saturn is the lightest planet we have, not the smallest. It's enormous, but the least dense. Its density is lower than water's. Then, if you could find a bathtub big enough, Saturn would float in it. The most terrifying planet in the solar system is also technically the one that would bob in your sink. That's the kind of place this is. Nothing about it behaves the way your gut says a planet should. You came looking for a world, you found a thing that swallows, and the swallowing is the calm part. Because the moment you're inside the atmosphere, you meet the wind. Number 2, winds that never stop. On Earth, we name our worst winds. We give hurricanes human names and track them on the news and talk about them for years afterward. A Category 5 hurricane, the kind that flattens a coastline, blows at around 250 kilometers an hour. That's the top of the scale. That's the worst weather our planet knows how to make. Saturn's wind blows 7 times harder than that. And it does it everywhere, all the time, forever. At the equator, the wind screams along at up to 1,800 kilometers an hour. Let that number sit for a second. The speed of sound, here on Earth, is about 1,200 kilometers an hour. Saturn's wind is supersonic. If you could somehow stand in it, you can't. But if you could, the wind would be moving faster than the sound of itself. You'd be hit before you ever heard it coming. There is no warning in a wind like that. There's just before and after. And the part that really gets under your skin isn't the speed. It's that it never stops. Think about every storm you've ever lived through. They all end. The wind picks up, it howls, it does its damage, and then it passes, and the air goes still, and you walk outside into that strange calm afterward. That calm is the deal. The storm ends. That's the promise weather makes you. Saturn doesn't make that promise. There's no eye to hide in, no calm afterward, no passing. The wind is not an event on Saturn. The wind is the condition of the place. It has been blowing like this for longer than there have been eyes to see it, and it will keep blowing long after the last person who ever wondered about it is gone. And the strangest thing, we're not even completely sure what drives it. There's no surface to slow it down with friction, no mountains, no coastlines, nothing to break it. So it just runs, faster and freer than anything weather can do on a world with ground. A wind with no floor and no end. And it's not even the loud part of the sky. The loud part comes next. Number 3, superbolts. You've seen lightning. Maybe you've been close to it. Close enough to feel the air change, close enough that the thunder hit you in the chest instead of just reaching your ears. It's one of the most powerful things most people ever stand near. A single bolt carries enough energy to kill you 100 times over. Saturn's lightning makes ours look like static off a wool sweater. The flashes down in those clouds are thousands of times more energetic than the worst bolt Earth has ever produced. We know because we can hear them. Spacecraft passing Saturn pick up the radio crackle of its lightning, the way an old AM radio picks up a storm 2 towns over. Except this storm is light hours away, and we can still hear it screaming. And it doesn't flash once and rest. When Saturn really gets going, the lightning fires more than 10 times every second. Not for a minute. Not for an hour. For months. Imagine a strobe of bolts, each one thousands of times stronger than anything you've ever flinched at, going off 10 times a second, continuously, in a cloud system wider than the planet you're standing on right now. There's no shelter from that. On Earth you can get low, get inside, wait it out. There's nowhere on Saturn to get inside of. There's no ground to get low against. You're just suspended in the same churning sky as the lightning, falling through it, while it goes off around you faster than you could count. And here's what's almost worse than the danger. It's the loneliness of it. All that energy, all that fury, in a place no creature has ever lived to be afraid of it. The most violent lightning in the solar system, flashing in the dark, for no one. But even all that lightning was just the warm-up, because all of it was coming from one storm. And that storm has a habit of getting so big it catches up to itself. Number 4, the Great White Spot. Every so often, and on Saturn, every so often means roughly once every Saturn year, which is about 30 of our years, the planet does something that doesn't seem like it should be physically allowed. A storm erupts, not a storm like we have, a storm the size of a planet. The last big one started in December of 2010. It began as a bright spot, a little smudge of white in the northern clouds, and then it grew. Within weeks it had swollen to about 10,000 kilometers across, roughly the width of the entire Earth, one storm as wide as our whole world. But that's not the part that should make the back of your neck go cold. Here's the part. It didn't just sit there being enormous. It stretched. It pulled out a long tail of churning white cloud, and that tail wrapped around the planet. And Saturn is huge. The way around it is something like 300,000 kilometers. And the storm kept growing, and the tail kept reaching all the way around until the front of the storm came back to where it started. The head of the storm ran into its own tail, Sit with that image. A storm so large that it lapped the entire planet and collided with the back of itself. There's nothing on Earth that even gestures at that. Our biggest storms are specks. This was a single weather system that circled an entire world and shook its own hand. And we got to watch the whole thing because the Cassini spacecraft was right there in orbit, listening to the lightning rates spike and fade, watching the head meet the tail, tracking it for months until slowly the great storm wore itself out and went quiet again, waiting, because it'll happen again. In another 30 years or so, Saturn will clear its throat and do it one more time, whether anyone's watching or not. A storm that swallows the planet whole on a timer. And the worst part is, it's not even the most permanent thing in that sky, because over at the pole, there's a storm that never leaves at all. Number 5. The eye at the pole. Go to the North Pole of Saturn and look straight down, and you'll find something that genuinely shouldn't work. A hurricane. A real one with a clear, dark eye at the center, spiraling cloud walls, the whole structure you'd recognize from a satellite picture of a storm off the coast of Florida. Except the eye of this one is about 2,000 kilometers across. The eye. Not the storm. The calm hole in the middle of it. It's roughly 50 times bigger than the eye of a hurricane on Earth. You could drop our entire planet's worst storm into the gap in the middle of Saturn's and lose it. And on Earth, a hurricane needs the ocean. It feeds on warm water, and the second it crawls up onto land, it starts to die. That's why they always weaken when they make landfall. They need the sea underneath them. Saturn's polar storm has no ocean. It has no land to crawl onto and die. It just sits there, locked over the pole, spinning, never wandering off the way our storms do, never running out of the thing that feeds it, never making landfall because there's no land to make. It has been parked on that pole for as long as we've been able to look. It might have been there for centuries. It might have been there for far, far longer than that. And then there's the thing around it, because that polar storm sits inside a shape. A six-sided shape. A hexagon drawn into the clouds 30,000 kilometers across, wide enough to fit about 4 Earths inside it, with edges so straight and clean it looks manufactured. Like something stamped into the planet on purpose. Nature doesn't usually do straight lines and sharp corners at that scale. Saturn does. It's just sitting up there at the pole, a perfect geometric shape wrapped around a storm that never dies, and it has been for longer than anyone knows. A storm that can't end, inside a shape that shouldn't exist. And we still haven't reached the strangest place on Saturn. To find that, you have to go down, way down, to where it rains diamonds. Number 6, it rains diamonds. Here's a sentence that sounds like a fairy tale until you understand what it actually means. Deep inside Saturn, it rains diamonds. It's the kind of fact that gets passed around because it sounds magical. Diamonds, falling from the sky like the planet is showing off. But think about what has to be true for that to happen. Think about the place you'd have to be standing. Go down far enough into Saturn and the sky stops being sky. The hydrogen gets squeezed so hard it turns into a liquid metal, a hot, glowing, electrically charged ocean with no surface, stretching down for thousands of kilometers. And it's in that metal sky that the strange rain happens. Helium separates out of the mixture and falls, in droplets, sinking down through the metal toward the core. An actual rain of liquid helium falling through a planet. And the carbon down there, under that pressure, gets crushed into diamond. So yes, somewhere in that crushing, glowing, metal-skied hell, there are gemstones falling like sleet. And before you wave that off as a nice story scientists tell, know that they've actually tested the helium part of it here on Earth. In a lab, researchers took the most powerful lasers they had, aimed them at a tiny sample of hydrogen and helium squeezed between 2 diamonds, and slammed it with a shockwave to recreate the pressure deep inside Saturn for a fraction of a second. And right at the moment they hit Saturn's conditions, the helium pulled away from the hydrogen, exactly like the rain the models predicted. They made a flicker of Saturn's interior on a tabletop, and it rained. Now here's the thing the fairy tale leaves out. That helium rain isn't just pretty. It's the reason Saturn is dangerous in a way you can't see from outside. As all that helium falls, it releases energy, gravitational energy, turned into heat. And that heat is enough that Saturn glows. The planet radiates about twice as much energy as it gets from the sun. It's running its own furnace deep inside, powered by an endless rain falling through a metal ocean. So the diamonds aren't a gift, they're a symptom. They're what it looks like when a place is so violent, so crushing, so hot, that carbon, the same stuff you're made of, gets squeezed into jewelry on the way down. You wouldn't be turned into a diamond if you fell in. You'd be gone long before. But the planet would, in its own slow way, keep raining them long after you were nothing. The prettiest fact about Saturn is a description of the worst place in it, and that's sort of the whole story of this planet. Beautiful on the outside, unspeakable underneath. Which might be why, for the longest time, it wouldn't even tell us something as simple as how long its day is. Number 7. The day that won't hold still. This one isn't loud, there's no storm, no lightning, no crushing fall. This one is quiet. And it's quietly one of the strangest things about Saturn, because it's a question a child could ask that we genuinely could not answer for decades. How long is a day on Saturn? You'd think it's easy. You watch the planet spin, you time how long it takes to come back around, done. That's how we do it for Mars, for Jupiter, for everything. You pick a feature, you watch it go around. But Saturn has no surface, no mountain, no landmark, no spot to follow. The clouds all move at different speeds, so you can't trust them either. So scientists turn to the next best thing, the planet's magnetic field. Most planets have a magnetic field that's tilted a little compared to the way they spin, and that tilt gives you a kind of beacon, a pulse you can time, a clock you can read from far away. Saturn's magnetic field is almost perfectly lined up with its spin, almost no tilt at all. It's the only planet we know that does this, and it means the beacon is gone. The planet erased its own clock. Saturn is, in the most literal way, hiding how fast it turns. So we guessed. The Voyager probes flew by in the 1980s and timed a radio signal and got about 10 hours and 39 minutes. Good enough, everyone thought. Except when Cassini got there years later and measured again, the number had changed. And it was even giving different answers from the northern and southern halves of the planet. The length of the day was drifting. A planet's day does not drift. That's not supposed to be a thing that can happen. The answer didn't come from the planet at all. It came from the rings. It turns out Saturn's insides ring like a bell as it spins, very faintly, and those tiny vibrations push on the rings and leave patterns in them, like ripples telling you about something you can't see. In 2019, scientists finally read those ripples and got the real answer. A day on Saturn is 10 hours, 33 minutes, and 38 seconds. It took us until 2019 to learn what time it is on Saturn. The planet held that secret right up until the rings gave it away, which is a strange thing to think about because those same rings and the thing that finally made Saturn talk are not going to be there much longer, but we'll get to that. First, the moons. Because the weirdness doesn't stop at the planet. It spreads. Number 8, Iapetus, the walnut moon. Saturn has dozens of moons, and most of them are ordinary lumps of ice and rock. And then there's Iapetus, which looks like two different moons got stitched into one, and nobody can fully explain either half. Start with the color. One side of Iapetus is dark. Not gray. Dark, like coal, like fresh asphalt. One of the blackest surfaces in the whole solar system. And the other side is bright, white as fresh snow. The same moon. One hemisphere black, one hemisphere white, with a line between them, like someone dipped half of it in ink. For a long time, this made no sense at all. The leading idea now is that there's a huge faint ring of dark dust way out around Saturn, shed by another moon, and Iapetus plows through it face first so its leading side gets painted black, and then the dark side soaks up more heat. The ice there boils off and migrates to the cold bright side, and the contrast runs away with itself. The moon paints itself. But the color isn't even the part that should make you uneasy. It's the wall. Running along the equator of Iapetus, almost exactly along the middle, there is a ridge of mountains. A wall. It stretches roughly 1,300 kilometers with peaks reaching up to 20 kilometers high, more than twice the height of Everest, and it wraps about 3/4 of the way around the moon. It's so prominent, it changes the moon's whole shape. Iapetus doesn't look like a ball, it looks like a walnut, a perfect seam of mountains circling the equator like something was built there. And we don't know why. We have guesses. Maybe Iapetus once spun so fast it bulged at the middle and the bulge froze in place. Maybe it had its own little ring once, and that ring collapsed and rained straight down onto the equator, building a mountain range out of falling debris. Maybe something else entirely. The honest answer is that there's a moon out there with a wall around its waist, and the smartest people we have are still arguing about how it got there. A moon painted in 2 colors wearing a mountain range like a belt. And it's not even the most suspicious thing orbiting Saturn. Because there's a little moon out there that looks exactly like a weapon, and it's keeping a secret. Number 9. Mimas, the Death Star moon. When the first clear pictures of Mimas came back, people laughed because it looks like a movie prop. It has one enormous crater on one side, a huge round scar with a mountain in the middle of it, and that crater is so big it makes the whole moon look like the Death Star from Star Wars. The resemblance is so strong, it's almost uncomfortable. That crater, by the way, is about 130 kilometers across, roughly a third of the entire moon. Whatever hit Mimas to make it nearly crack the whole thing in half. So for decades, that was Mimas. The funny one. The little gray moon that looks like a battle station. A dead, frozen, cratered rock, end of story. Except it wasn't the end of the story. In 2024, scientists looked closely at the way Mimas wobbles as it orbits Saturn, a tiny rocking motion, back and forth, and the wobble was wrong. It was the kind of wobble you only get if the inside of the moon isn't solid. If something underneath the crust is sloshing. And when they ran the numbers, the answer came back. Mimas has an ocean. A real one. Liquid water hidden maybe 20 or 30 kilometers beneath that battered frozen shell. And here's the part that makes it genuinely eerie. Mimas' surface is ancient. It's covered in craters, beaten up, old. It looks completely dead. Moons that we know have oceans, like Europa, wear it on their faces. Their surfaces are cracked and fresh and obviously hiding something. Mimas hides it perfectly. From the outside, it's just a scarred little rock that looks like a prop. Inside, there's a sea. And that ocean might be shockingly young, only a few million years old, brand new in cosmic terms. So the moon that looks the most like a weapon, the one everybody wrote off as a dead joke, was quietly carrying a hidden ocean the whole time. Which should make you wonder what else out there looks dead and isn't. What else is keeping its secret better than Mimas did? That's the thing about Saturn. The closer you look, the less you trust any of it. And there's one last thing to look at. The thing that makes Saturn Saturn. And it's the most unsettling of all, not because it'll kill you, but because of what it tells you about time. Number 10. The rings are dying. The rings are the whole reason you recognize Saturn. They're the thing that makes it the pretty one, the famous one, the one you can pick out of a lineup. They look eternal. They look like they've always been there and always will be. Like they're part of what the planet is. They're not. And this is where the most terrifying planet in the solar system stops trying to scare you and does something worse. It makes you sad. Here's the first surprise. The rings are young. Stunningly young. When Cassini measured Saturn's gravity and weighed the rings, the numbers came back saying they're only somewhere between 100 and 400 million years old. Saturn itself is 4.5 billion years old. So the rings showed up incredibly late. Late enough that there were already dinosaurs walking around down here on Earth when Saturn was still a bare planet with nothing around it. Some of the dinosaurs you learned about as a kid are older than Saturn's rings. The most timeless looking thing in the sky is younger than the Stegosaurus. And now the second surprise, the one that actually lands. They're falling. Saturn's magnetic field is reaching up into the rings, grabbing icy particles and pulling them down into the planet. It's called ring rain, and it is happening right now as you sit here. Enough water is draining out of those rings and falling into Saturn to fill an Olympic swimming pool every half hour. And remember Cassini, the probe Saturn swallowed at the end? Before it died, on those final daring dives, it threaded the gap between the planet and the rings, a place nothing had ever flown, and it felt the material raining inward against its own body. The last thing that spacecraft did before Saturn destroyed it was confirm that the rings are bleeding out. The rings are pouring themselves into Saturn slowly, steadily, and they are not being refilled. Do the math on that and you get something that stops you. The rings have at most 100 million years left, probably less. On a cosmic clock, that's nothing. That's the last few seconds of the movie. Saturn has had rings for a sliver of its life, and it will spend the rest of its life without them. Bare again. Just a pale banded ball, the way it started. And here's the turn, the thing I want you to actually feel. Saturn has existed for 4.5 billion years. It will exist for billions more. And the rings, the one feature that makes it the planet everyone loves, exist for only this thin little window in the middle. You were born inside that window. You happened to show up on this one small planet during the exact stretch of cosmic time when Saturn has rings to see. 100 million years earlier, nothing. 100 million years from now, nothing. But now tonight, they're there. And they're falling. That's the most terrifying thing about the most beautiful planet. Not that it would crush you, or drown you in supersonic wind, or strike you with lightning, or swallow you with no ground to land on, though it would do all of that. It's that even Saturn's beauty is temporary. The rings are a sandcastle, and the tide is already coming in. You just got lucky enough to be standing on the beach while it's still here. So the next time you see that little ringed planet on a poster, or in a kid's drawing, or through a backyard telescope on a cold, clear night, look a second longer than you normally would. You're seeing something that almost wasn't here and won't be here for long. The rings are falling into Saturn right now. You got here just in time to watch. And whether that makes you the luckiest thing alive or the loneliest, I'll let you decide on the way out.